Hi guys, welcome back aboard our 44-foot, no longer leaking, hurricane-damaged catamaran project boat. Seeing as we are no longer leaking, I can now move on with the work in the bottom of the two hulls. But there's also another project I want to get spun up. Let's head downstairs and take a look at the goals for this sprint. I'm slowly getting to the point where I can start picking up a lot of speed and make some progress. But for me to do that, it's important that I can work on multiple projects at the same time. That way, when one project gets impeded, I can switch to another one and keep the progress rolling. And also, any projects that I can continue working on aboard Athena means I can get in a few more hours every day before bedtime. As you saw in last week's video, I've started slowly behind the scenes working on the hatches for the tramp ramp here. But there's something else for the tramp ramp I want to get started on. That's this guy, our anchor roller. He sits inside of the tramp ramp and guides the anchor and the chain. We have this one guy here. He's a little bit bent, but I think I can straighten him out. The thing is, all the modern Antares I've been aboard, they seem to have two of these, meaning they can have two anchors ready to go. Fortunately, this is a fairly simple part. There are 6 pieces of stainless, 3 of them have some bends in them, but other than that, it is just a tiny bit of welding, and I think even my stainless welding abilities are going to be able to do this. So I'm going to add a task to our board here called Anchor Roller CAD Design plus Order Components. The astute will have noted that I've also made another change to our area here. Up here I've got our long-term plan, our major milestones before the summer of next year, 2025. And then we'll have all the short-term goals down here. Our long-term plan remains the same it's been for the last few months, and that is to have working engines, steering, watertight hulls, and an anchoring setup before next summer. The reason for that is in case we, for whatever reason, need to move the boat, then I want to be able to put it in the water, even though it's in no way finished, just to have that option. So most of the projects, not all, but most of the projects you'll see me working on for the next 8 months or whatever, they're going to be working towards these goals up here. So what can we do to work towards that in the short term, aka our next sprint here? So we will drain and remove the starboard diesel tank because we need to figure out if we need new diesel tanks. We also need to clean up the inside of both of the hulls. That is so that we can inspect for damage. Also, we need to then repair any damage we find. And then, also because of the cleaning, we need to prep for paint. And then finally, paint the insides of the bottoms of both of the hulls. And that is in preparation of then being able to install the engines. And I'm adding these little pieces of extra tape because it's hella windy here right now and we might have another hurricane blow through at the end of next week. So, better make sure these are secure. When I get home tonight, I will get started on the anchor roller CAD design. And also today we're going to get started on this one. Drain and remove the starboard diesel tank. Brian had left behind an empty 55-gallon blue drum. Perfect for storing the diesel from the tank until I figure out what to do with it. Conveniently, there's a hole in the hull from an old through hull right next to the tank. I figured I could use one of these jiggle hoses to drain most of the diesel out of the tank and then use a jerry can for the last little bit. Working in the bottom of the hulls is starting to get a little bit old. There's a lot of climbing in and climbing out. On the diesel tank, I noticed that the tank sender unit seemed kind of loose. In fact, very loose. There was nothing securing the unit to the tank. That doesn't seem promising for the fuel inside of the tank. Yeah, I don't think the diesel is going to be in pristine condition. I got my plastic drum maneuvered into position and taped the hose to it to make sure it wouldn't pop out. After a bit of rigorous jiggling, the diesel started to flow. At only 3.5 gallons per minute, this is going to take a while. To make absolutely sure I didn't overfill the drum, I sat down next to it and started working on the anchor roller design. Checking on the hose up in the boat, I noticed there was a lot of nasty stuff getting sucked up as soon as I moved the hose closer to the bottom. A fair chunk of time later, I couldn't get more diesel out with the jiggly hose, so I switched to my next contraption, complete with 2 stir sticks taped together to make sure the hose gets all the way to the bottom of the tank. And yeah, yet more nasty stuff at the bottom. Plenty of water and lots of clumps. Getting the last bit of diesel out was a somewhat tedious affair, but with a bit of persistence, I made it through. Taking a peek inside of the tank, I spotted something white. I've never seen anything like this before in a tank, so I got out my little pokey camera to get a closer look. I have no idea what this is. It is a bright white and it looks kind of like wax. Anywho, time for the workout of the day. I moved the 55-gallon yucky drum over next to the other 55-gallon yucky drum. Buy a boat, they said. It'll be fun, they said. The top of the tank was covered in old cables and plumbing. I am not going to reuse any of this stuff, so I might as well get it out of here. Thanks to a good pair of pliers and lots of snipping, it didn't take long to clear the top of the tank. After a quick wipe down, the tank still looked somewhat decrepit, but keep in mind this tank is 25 years old. One of the things I really appreciate about the PDQ-44 and the Antares 44 is the way the tanks are installed. No part of the tank sits against the hull or sits on anything. The tanks are hanging. This is how you make an aluminum tank last for a really long time. Keep in mind that this tank was submerged when the boat was partially sunk by the hurricane. There's some dissimilar metals here, submerged in salt water. There's all the yucky stuff that was inside of the tank. So yeah, I'm fully expecting this tank to be in much worse shape than the port tank. In terms of getting the blessed diesel tank out of here, I think it's going to be a little bit of a struggle. And I think I remember from some of Brian's old videos that the little shelf that's here, which is for the starter battery for the engine, it has to come out for the tank to be able to come out, or at least that was the case over on port side. It looks like the tank is secured with 8 screws on each side, or it used to be 8 screws. There's at least 2 missing here, but let's get those out and see if I can get the tank out. Phew, that was fun, but at least now both of the tanks are out of the boat. Financial tip of the day, I think if you're doing a refit and you also have a gym membership, you might be wasting money. This is the port tank and this is the starboard tank, and just to the naked eye, the starboard one looks way more hit, but I don't know if that's just because I haven't cleaned it yet. I've never had aluminum tanks before, so I know nothing, but I'm wondering if I should reuse those old tanks or if I should order new ones. I'm sure new ones are not cheap, and yeah, it would be nice not to have to do that, but what do you think? Go ahead and leave a comment down below. Maybe you know some kind of expert that can give me some guidance. Good news is we can move the drain and remove starboard tank into the done column. Woohoo! As far as the other task in the doing column, the anchor roller CAD design and order components, I've made some progress. Let me show you. This should look very familiar. This should be within a few millimeters of the original one. I made this using basically a couple of photos that I then calibrated for size and drew the parts on top of that. And yeah, it should be very close to the original. I've turned off the other components in the drawing to be able to show you that the 2 sides here, they have the bends in them that we need to form the flange, but I haven't put the holes in the flanges yet. I'm no expert, but I do know that if you put a hole too close to a bend, then when they do the bend, then the hole is going to get elongated and misshaped. So I think it's easier for me just to drill the holes when I get the parts. Using the flat pattern feature, I then made this, which is what will tell Send Cut Send exactly how to bend this. I've made a file for each of my little parts or components that I need. I've uploaded that to Send Cut Send, and I've chosen to have it made in 316 stainless. I'm not gonna lie, I did have a brief moment of sticker shock because it was over $450 to order that bit of stainless. So yeah, prices must have gone up in the last few years, but at least we can close the anchor roller CAD design and order parts task. The nice thing about using CAD and a service like Send Cut Send is once those parts show up, they should be a nice snug fit with not much of a gap or anything, so it's going to be way easier for me to weld. But speaking of the welding, I don't have a welder as of yet, and I don't really know what to get here in the US. I would love it if one of you guys had a recommendation. The wish list is as follows. Definitely 120 volts. It would be nice with DC and AC. I'm not gonna attempt the tanks. I've never welded aluminum before, but maybe at some point in the future it'd be nice to take a stab at welding some aluminum. So maybe also AC. I definitely want a high frequency start and pulse. I don't care so much about MIG welding. It's gonna be TIG, everything I do for the boat. So yeah, if you have some kind of recommendation for a good, not hyper expensive welder, I would very much appreciate it. Go ahead and leave a comment down below. Enough yammering on, let's clamber back up inside and get to the cleaning. As I peered into the abyss, I couldn't help but be happy that I didn't find any unexpected damage behind the diesel tank. There were some treasures hidden under the tank, no millions of dollars or anything, but there was an empty tube of lotion. I thought this was kinda cool. To get a nice snug fit for the tank, it looks like they squirted in some thickened resin around the flange after the tank was secured with screws. I thought that was kind of a cool trick. Time to get cleaning. With the help of a scrubby brush left behind by Brian and my tiny Bosch vacuum, I got most of the dust removed and then promptly got detoured on a little side quest. All this old wiring needs to go. It might be tempting to try and reuse some of it, but all of this has been submerged and could invite all kinds of annoying issues. I think the right choice here is to get rid of it and then cry about it in a few years when I have to buy new cable. Pulling the thread on that sweater, I continued into the starboard aft cabin. Lots more decrepit old wiring in there. Having already made a bunch of new Antares friends, I'm not super concerned about figuring out what the purpose of any of this wiring was. It'll be easy to check with some of them, or just come up with my own solution when it comes time to rewire everything. Working in the aft cabin came with a fun game of, I wonder if I can step on this without it breaking, every time I needed to get a tool. Ta-da! That looks infinitely better if I do say so myself. Less cables and a lot less dust. Don't get me wrong, there is still plenty of cleaning left to be done in here, but I think that's something Ava would find super rewarding. Now the biggest benefit to getting all these cables out of here now is the fact that I can get this opening sealed up with a bit of foam. Of course, before the boat goes back in the water, we need to figure out something that's a little bit more substantial than this. We need either new escape hatches or simply just to glass over the openings. The foam is just temporary. It is there to keep the cold in and also to attempt to keep the bugs out, because we have some critters that have taken up residency and we don't need more of those. I also sealed the escape hatch over in the port cabin and then set to work cleaning up the port hull, where I was almost instantly rewarded for my efforts by getting sprayed in the face by some mysterious hose when I was trying to cut it. It got me real good, but fortunately it seemed like it was just pressurized water. There was way less wiring over in the port hull and I quickly got what was there removed. The old decrepit engine room insulation was a different matter. It took a while. It was still very well stuck on. That is thirsty work, but yeah, I think we can now close the cleanup inside of both of the hulls, meaning I have gotten all of the junk out of there. I still need to clean them to prep for paint, but that will require an industrial strength and amount of degreaser. The nothing short of amazing news is that I have not yet found any damage that will need to be repaired, so fingers crossed. While we aren't ready to start painting yet, and I do need to do a lot of degreasing and some sanding up there before we really are, there is a test I should get started now. This is the primer I'm going to be using. This is TotalBoat's Total Protect, but this is a two-part paint. It looks like a lot of the surfaces on the inside of the bottom of the hulls is flow coat, or that's basically just gel coat. But there are a couple of areas where the color is slightly different, and there's also an area where the color is slightly different and there's a little bit of flaking going on. So some of that might have been a one-part paint, and now I'm going to want to paint with a two-part paint. So there's a test we should do. Typically, it's not recommended to apply two-part paint on top of a one-part paint because that might make the one-part paint fail. But this is a 20-year-old boat. It's had a handful of owners. I have no idea what they have used, and I have no way of finding out what they have used. So yeah, the best I can do is just to do a little test. The test is very simple. It is just a matter of getting a little area nice and clean so it's prepped for paint, mixing up a little bit of two-part paint, applying that, and then letting it fully cure. If nothing goes sideways, then there's a good chance it'll be okay. I only need a tiny bit of paint. Cue the tiniest mixing cup. While I don't have any degreaser, what I do have is the thinner for this paint. I'll use that to clean the surface. This might sound weird, but there is something very rewarding about stirring a can of paint that's been sitting for a while and getting it all nice and mixed. Here you can see the different colors. That's making me think that somebody painted the area where the engine sits. I cleaned the surfaces and applied 2 spots in the starboard hull and 3 spots in the port hull. It would be odd if somebody had used different paints in the 2 hulls, but you never know. I'll leave my little test dots there for a day or two, and that should give me an indication as to the amount of prep work I'm in for. Tiny bit or a mountain. Before ending this video, I want to say a great big thank you to Robert. He's the first ever person to use our new Amazon wishlist. The funny thing is, I don't remember actually putting this thing on the wishlist, but it's very welcome because the electronic scissors I have that I bought used off of eBay, the battery in those, it only lasts a few minutes, so it's kind of annoying. But yeah, thank you so much to Robert for both these things. Fair warning, it's a pretty boring wish list. It's mostly sanding related. There's a lot of these on here. These are the sanding nets I really like. They're a heck of a lot cheaper than the Mirka sanding nets, but they are, at least in my opinion, just as good. And this is empty, so I don't know what that was doing up there. Unfortunately, I am gonna have to cut this video a little bit short because this week I'm losing 2 days here at the catamaran. I have to go to the dentist to get a new crown, and also I have to get the spiffy mobile to a mechanic, and those 2 things could not happen on the same day, so that's a little bit annoying. I'm happy that I got a solid start this week, but what I'm most excited about is the fact that I can now work on multiple projects. I've got the bow roller, I've got the hatches for the tramp ramp, I've got the diesel tanks I need to get cleaned out and figure out if we can use, and I've got the inside of the bottom of the hulls there, so I can finally work on multiple projects at the same time. I know there's a thing about fighting a war on multiple fronts that might not be the best thing, but I do feel like it's good for me to have multiple projects, so if one gets impeded, then I can switch to something else, and it's just going to allow me to utilize my time a little bit more effectively and just get more done. And on that bit of joyous news, I will end this week's video here. As always, feel free to leave a comment down below, and don't forget, if you've enjoyed this video, please remember to leave a like. See you! Pew pew!